Hey guys, I watched all the films that were nominated for the Best Picture at this year's Oscars. As we're all aware of, Everything Everywhere took home the coveted award along with 6 others, and I totally agree with most of the awards it won. So since 2009, the Academy has increased the number of films that can be nominated for Best Picture from 5 to 10. And while I agree, in a year there are so many films that are at least due the nomination nod, for this year's Oscars, I felt like half the nominees were just to fill in space. So with that being said, this is my honest review of all 10 films that were nominated from worst to best. Now, disclaimer, this is just my honest opinion, but I feel like the last 5 films on my list shouldn't have even been nominated. So, here goes nothing. In last place, we have Avatar: Way of Water. I'm not gonna lie, it was kind of entertaining towards the middle and end, but at the end of the day, it just feels like it's a movie we've seen time and time again. It felt like a recycled film from the first movie. The conflict with the humans felt dull and uninspired. And for the most part, I felt like the acting from the secondary characters were pretty awful. I'm sorry for being so blunt. Overall, the story is quite predictable. And more than a highbrow science fiction movie, it feels more like kind of like a typical superhero blockbuster. Sorry, Avatar. Okay, next up we have Baz Luhrmann's Elvis. It chronicles the life of the American rock and roll singer and actor Elvis Presley under the management of Colonel Tom Parker. The film stars Austin Butler and Tom Hanks. Okay, so a thing that this movie has going for it is Austin Butler's performance. I was not expecting anything, to be honest, because I did not think he looked like Elvis at all. And the only thing I've actually seen Austin Butler act in was Carrie Diaries. So I didn't think he really had it in him, but he did play his role really well. Other than that, I do love Baz Luhrmann. I love his style, but I just felt like maybe for this movie, it wasn't the right fit. If you've seen the film, there are a lot of sequences where it gets really flashy and the camera moves in slow motion. And I think it's supposed to make us feel hyped and feel the feelings for Elvis, but it had a reverse effect on me. For me, it felt more like a fever dream. It made the film feel like it was dragging on longer than it should have. And I feel like I just didn't think having the story told from Colonel Tom Parker's perspective was the right call. I had no context for Elvis before this. I didn't know that his manager was so evil. I didn't know that he had a terrible manager before watching this film. And from the very start, we know Colonel Tom Parker is not a good guy. And it's told from his perspective. And because of that, it feels like from point A to point B, it just feels like a really long, straight line. There was no shift. There was no aha moment. The tone is pretty much the same. We know he's a bad guy from the start. It ends off with him being a bad guy. And because of that, I feel like the story felt draggier and longer than it should have. Maybe if it was told from Elvis's perspective or from basically anyone else's perspective but the bad guy, maybe it would have helped. But overall, I was not entertained while watching this film, which is such a letdown because it's Elvis, All right, next up is a movie I actually enjoyed, but I just don't think it deserved to be nominated, and it's Top Gun Maverick. So 30 years of service leads Maverick to train a group of elite Top Gun graduates to prepare for a high-profile mission while Maverick battles his past demons. Now, like I said, it was an enjoyable movie. It made me nostalgic of blockbusters of yesteryears, like 80s, 90s, even the early 2000s. And there are movies that, they can make you think and rip you up and heal you up at the same time, and movies that make you open your eyes and broaden your horizons. But then there are movies that are just for pure enjoyment, a little escapism from your daily life, adding joy to the mundane, and this is what that movie was. But it's just not Best Picture material, you know what I mean? It's kind of cheesy. Come on, let's be honest. It's a little cheesy, it has unoriginal ideas. It's a cliche of itself, the rebellious, talented Maverick butting heads with authority, doing things unconventionally. Yeah, there's nothing much more to say other than it's an entertaining film, but just not Oscar-worthy in my opinion. I am anticipating a lot of hate with the next film because of how low I ranked it. But here it goes. It's The Fabelmans by Steven Spielberg. I know you must be like, what is she saying? What is she thinking? But let me just tell you, when I watch movies, I usually go in completely blind. I don't even watch trailers. And I try not to read reviews because I want to go in unbiased. And I feel like I love experiencing a movie without knowing what it's about. And a good movie should be able to stand on its own feet. should not require any context. Okay, so let me just get into it. The synopsis of the film is young Sammy Fabelman falls in love with movies after his parents take him to see The Greatest Show on Earth. Armed with a camera, Sammy starts to make his own films at home, much to the delight of his supportive mother. Okay, so why is this so low on my list? Firstly, it took me till like the end of the film to realize this is supposed to be a coming of age story about Sammy. I don't think I'm a dense person, but the reason why is because I felt like the movie was so disjointed. For me, a coming of age film would typically show the main character go through life. We see time change, we see a lot of trials and tribulations, lessons being taught, yada yada yada. But in this movie, 75% of the film was about his mom. And it was like, I thought the movie was Sammy's mom told through Sammy's eyes, kind of a thing. And then it just quickly shifts to Sammy in high school getting bullied. Like, the mom story is just done now. And now it's about him getting bullied, which just felt like such a jarring shift for me. The whole plot with the bullies, like, it did not run me well. Because firstly, they're introduced so late, and like 10 minutes after they're introduced, the chapter ends with Sammy confronting a bully. And this whole scene was just so highly unbelievable for me because, number one, this bully was able to identify, assess, and analyze why he was feeling so upset at Sammy, and was able to express it to him so articulately, all within a span of half an hour, which I find highly unbelievable for a teenage boy to be able to do. And not only that, I just did not care for the scene at all because, like I said, these characters were introduced just like 10 minutes prior. And boom, like that chapter of high school just ends. And now it's Sammy as an intern having panic attacks. And as quickly as that chapter begins, it ends. And that's how the movie ends. So I'm sorry, but it just felt like a highly disjointed film. There was just too much emphasis on the mom, to the point where I was actually feeling a lot more connected to the mom than to Sammy, which I don't think is the right thing for the audience to be feeling when the movie is supposed to be about Sammy. Next, I felt like the movie was dated, and I'm not talking in terms of the period it's set in. I'm talking about how information was passed to us. The execution, it felt very 90s. It felt very, like soapy, dramatic. For example, the revelation of the mom's infidelity is rolled out 3 times. It was a little overkill and boring. First is when we, the audience, figure out something's happening between her and the dad's best friend. Second is when Sammy finds out. And third is when she realizes that Sammy knows. It did not have to be rolled out that many times, is what I'm saying. But now, this is when context comes into play. When you're made aware that this is a very personal film, actually, by the filmmaker who has gifted mankind with so many wonderful films, original stories, classics for the ages, and to have the man himself show a very intimate glimpse into his upbringing, then it becomes a special film, for sure. Had I known that before watching the movie, maybe it would have shifted how I saw the movie. But because I went in blind, and I didn't know this was his autobiography, I think my sentiments would have remained the same. But having that bit of context there, it changes it, for sure. Also, side note, Michelle Williams was really good. Okay, so in 6th place, we have Women Talking, written and directed by Sarah Polley. So the women of an isolated religious colony reveal a shocking secret about the colony's men. For years, the men have occasionally drugged the women and then sexually assaulted them. The truth comes out and the women talk about their new situation. So the women of the village have 3 choices for themselves. It's either to stay and do nothing, stay and fight, or to leave. And the whole film is them discussing about which is the best option for them. And as the movie suggests, there is a lot of talking. And I think as I review more films, you'll know that I appreciate films that show more than tell. I feel like it's more effective storytelling. But with that being said, I do think it was really interesting to watch the dialogue, to watch different sides on these issues flesh it out in front of us. And these are very real discussions and point of views that are still relevant in today's time, which is actually very sad. And as I watched the film, I realized that maybe this level of obviousness and bluntness is needed to get through to people's heads about women's issues. Because at the start, I was a little thrown off with how on the nose it was about it being a reflection of today's society. But, as you watch the film, it makes you realize that maybe it needs to be at this level of obviousness. Claire Foy was the scene stealer for me. It's one of those movies that make you think and opens a discussion that I think needs to be discussed. And I was very surprised to find out it was based on a true story. Okay, the next 5 films were all phenomenal. If I could, I would have given all of them an Oscar. In 5th place is Triangle of Sadness, a satirical black comedy film written and directed by Ruben Östlund in his English language feature film debut, which follows an influencer couple on a luxury cruise with wealthy guests. So I have a soft spot for absurdity. It's entertaining, split into 3 acts. It's not a subtle take on influencer culture, selfies, vapid, out of touch, wealthy 1% people. I found it enjoyable. I found it entertaining. Ruben Östlund is a filmmaker who is keenly interested in the strangeness of human beings. And I think the spectacle he crafted achieved highlighting what a strange species we are and have become. I don't want to ruin it. I don't want to talk too much about what happens in the film. Just watch it. It'll take you on a ride. So next up is a movie of a genre I don't usually find myself voluntarily watching. All Quiet on the Western Front is a German language epic anti-war film based on the 1929 novel of the same name, directed by Edward Berger. Set during World War I, it follows the life of an idealistic young German soldier named Paul. After enlisting in the German army with his friends, Paul finds himself exposed to the realities of war, shattering his early hopes of becoming a hero as he does his best to survive. The film adds a parallel story not found in the book, which follows the armistice negotiations to end the war. So I love the contrast between the idealism that there is in the beginning and the harsh realities of war, and the juxtaposition between the men in charge in their cushy offices drinking coffee and complaining about day-old croissants, who make the decisions that impact the hundreds of thousands of soldiers who are fighting for them. And how, just mere minutes and decisions affects whether they live or not. It just really highlights the callousness, the senselessness, and the ego involved in these disputes. Having taken place more than 100 years ago, it really calls the question in this day and age, is war ever the answer to anything? Does fighting and winning make up for all that is lost at the end of the day? It was absolutely powerful. And not only that, but the performances were so good. I feel like the characters really uplift the film. It makes the film so much more enjoyable and powerful. And it was just all around well done. Very moving. In 3rd place, we have Tar, a psychological drama film written and directed by Todd Field. It stars Cate Blanchett as Lydia Tar, a renowned conductor who is accused of sexual misconduct. I feel like this movie is such an accomplishment. First of all, it's such a contemporary movie, and it discusses the complexity of many issues that we as a society haven't faced previously. It's also new, when it comes to unpacking all the layers and themes packaged with Cate Blanchett's mesmerizing performance. We have rise and downfall of fame, cancel culture, entitlement, social boundaries. And even though this is told through the single character of Lydia Tar, director Todd Field crafts it as like a contemporary epic that universally connects to its audiences. And I just feel like it was just so masterfully done. The themes are left open with plenty of room for audience to interpret. And like I said, Cate Blanchett, her performance was just so good. She brings so much to Lydia Tar. She brings Lydia Tar to life. Don't miss out on this movie. I loved The Banshees of Inisherin. Absurdity, check. Themes that leave you thinking long after the movie's done, check. Miniature donkey, check. It's a black tragic comedy written, directed, and produced by Martin McDonough. Set on a remote island off the west coast of Ireland, the film stars Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson as 2 lifelong friends who find themselves at an impasse when one abruptly ends their relationship with alarming consequences for both of them. Guys, it's basically a bromance breakup. I just love how simply put the movie can be explained like that. But it also opens so much for us to discuss. It focuses on themes of isolation, personal identity. We have Brendan Gleeson's character he's the one who initiates basically the breakup of the friendship, who is thinking about his legacy and what mark he's going to leave on the world after he dies. It's very existential, and he's coming to terms with his mortality, and he wants to spend all his time making something so that strangers could remember him by. Whereas Colin Farrell's character is the complete opposite. He couldn't give two hoots about what other people think about him. For him, he's very content in his little simple village with his friends and his family, just having a handful of people who love him. That's what he cares about. And while it focuses on these really complex and deep themes, the writing perfectly blends the comedy with all the seriousness. And I feel like it truly allows layers of emotion to be captured in just about every scene. Also, I just think it's just so refreshing to see men be portrayed as emotional and, communicate their feelings and talk about relationships and friendships. It's just something that I'd like to see more of. Yeah. And the whole film is packaged like almost like a folklore tragic fairy tale almost. It's beautiful. It's just such a lovely film. Also, it's one of the most original films I've seen in a long time. And I actually kind of wish that this movie had won Best Original Screenplay. Performances, again, amazing. It's just such a wonderful, wonderful story. So if you made it this far, you probably guessed by now that my number one film was Everything Everywhere All at Once. What can I say that hasn't already been said? It's such an original feat with a touching call to something that I think has been a very new concept of our times, which is generational trauma. It's a fairly new concept for this generation, taking responsibility to not pass on toxic, harmful traits to the next generation. It's also about being able to apologize, which is firstly, when it comes to the older generations, where it's kind of hard for them to apologize to children, and when you couple that with also like the Asian dynamics as well, it's so original and something that I think touches a lot of people. At the very heart, we have a beautiful picture of a family who just want to love and be accepted. Like, this is my own original thought, but I'm not sure if it's already been said or if it was very obvious and everyone already kind of got it, but not me. But I just realized that, so obviously there's the bagel in the film, which is like the everything, it's like a play on the a bagel with everything on it. But also the title itself, Everything Everywhere All at Once, is something that a mother is to us, right? Society expects mothers to be everything, everywhere, all at once. Let me know if you already understood that the first time you watched the film, but it took me while I was writing out this script for this video to be like, oh shit. There's just so many layers to it. It's great. Everything about it is original. I love that. So now I want to know what you guys think. Do you think my list is completely upside down? Which were your favorite movies from the 10 films that were nominated? Let me know down in the comments. And please subscribe to my channel. It means a lot. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified for more reviews like this. I got a lot of reviews coming up. So I'll see you guys next time. Bye.